Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Facebook Live Challenge by TAS. We had decided earlier that we are going to have one Facebook Live Challenge per week, but as we all know that COVID pandemic is at different stages in in different parts of our country. But one thing is very relevant in all the stages of COVID pandemic, that is high flow nasal cannula oxygen therapy. And today we have Dr. Sandesh Kumar with us, who is going to speak on high flow nasal cannula oxygen therapy. Dr. Sandesh has done his MD anesthesiology from PGIMR Jipmer, from
Chandigarh.
Chandigarh, right? And then he went on to specialize in intensive care, and he has worked in Ruby Hall Clinic, then Royal Liverpool, then Medanta Medicity, and currently he is working with Cloud Physician. He has a special interest in mechanical ventilation. So now I think over to you, Dr. Sandesh.
Hi, good evening, all. Thanks for having me here on this forum. So, in the next 20 minutes or so, I'll be briefly discussing about high flow nasal oxygen therapy, mainly in terms of dealing with acute hypoxemic respiratory failure. So, I won't be covering use of HFNC in post-operative setting or in other settings. But I'll be concentrating mainly on hypoxemic respiratory failure setting. But it's just a physiological aspects and benefits of high flow nasal oxygen therapy in such settings. So I'll be discussing this topic in these headings. The background, the conventional devices. So, what are the disadvantages of these conventional devices? And then coming to HFNC, what do you mean by HFNC? Introduce you to new devices that we have, physiological benefits, and few slides on the evidence. So, oxygen therapy, as we know, is the first line treatment for any patient with hypoxemic respiratory failure. So, any patient who walks to your hospital with pneumonia, who has a respiratory distress, the first thing that you would do is put them on oxygen. However, the oxygen delivery, the alveolar oxygen delivery, depends on various factors. So the first most important factor is the oxygen flow rate that we are giving, the fraction of inspired oxygen, what interface that we are using, and what is the inspiratory demand. So most often when we decide to give or decide on what kind of oxygen therapy we need to keep in mind the patient's interface and inspiratory demand, so which we often ignore. So conventionally, oxygen therapy or oxygen therapy devices can be divided into low flow devices, intermediate flow devices, and high flow devices. So the traditional low flow devices are the nasal cannulas that we have, or the Hudson mask, or the tracheostomy mask. These are the low flow devices. They can also be called as variable performance devices, because the flow, the FiO2 delivered will not be constant. So it is purely dependent on the patient's inspiratory demands and the leak around the mask. So oxygen dilution will significantly determine the amount of FiO2 that is being delivered to the patient, and hence they are called as variable performance devices. So they can deliver FiO2s of 100% till 15 liters per minute. If the inspiratory demand is above this, probably you won't be getting the set FiO2, the FiO2, the oxygen, that the amount of oxygen that you are giving. As you can see, even during quiet breathing, at the peak of inspiration, the inspiratory flow rates exceed up to 30 liters per minute. So which is definitely more over and above the amount that we are supplying, and hence oxygen dilution invariably takes place. So to overcome with that, we can use what we have, the fixed performance devices, the Venturi mask. So the Venturi devices. So if you know, what is the inspiratory demand, what is the clinical status of your patient, so you can kind of make use of these devices, and deliver a fixed FiO2 at a higher flow rates. but again, they have their own limitations, and you won't be able to give higher flows with these Venturi mask as well. So if you want to give, FiO2s above 60%, so these Venturi devices again fail to perform, and you won't be able to sustain oxygenation in these acutely hypoxemic respiratory patients. So so that is the background. And physiologically, our nose and upper airway plays a significant role. So they act as conditioners. So for the inspired air that goes in, it humidifies the nasal mucosa, it condenses, it acts as a filter. So when you give the air, when you give oxygen that is dry and that is cold, that will lead to dryness of mucosa. That will lead to a lot of disadvantages. It leads to dry nose, it leads to dry throat, it can lead to nasal pain, and hence poor tolerance of oxygen therapy. And it also leads to increased airway resistance, as we see, especially when you get exposed to cold air. There will be bronchoconstriction, there will be constriction of your airways, leading to increase in airway resistance. So because of the dryness, it also impairs the nasal mucociliary clearance, it reduces it, and probably also predisposes to have infections. All of this can also lead to increased airway inflammation. And as anesthetists, we all know patients who are on these oxygen therapy for long time, they will have, without humidification, without appropriate humidification, patients can have dry secretions. So it will be a nightmare to intubate these patients. They can have, we won't be able to see cords, or even if you see cords, you won't be able to place a tube because everything is dry, the tube is not going smoothly. So it can lead to a potential airway emergency. So these are few of the disadvantages. And also there is theoretically that it can also increase the airway inflammation. So what is HFNC? So to tide over with all of these disadvantages or side effects, we came across with numerous solutions, and one such solution is high flow nasal oxygen therapy. There is no universally accepted definition of high flow nasal oxygen therapy, but if you were to put a definition, we would call it as a reliable delivery of variable concentration of heated and humidified oxygen at high flows of up to 60 liters per minute consistently. So why we say 60 liters? Because beyond 60 liters, the humidity with which you can give, or the temperature with which you can deliver oxygen, is not reliable. So with the technology that we have currently, so we can reliably give heated and humidified oxygen only up to 60 liters per minute. So commercially, we have 2 or 3 companies which are manufacturing high flow nasal oxygen devices. So in India, we have the OptiFlow or Airvo 2 devices, which is being produced by the Fisher and Paykel company. Recently, we have also seen a lot of Chinese devices in the market, especially with the increase in COVID cases. We have seen a lot of these devices. One is from Vincent Medicals. There are other devices like Vaportherm, which is predominantly in North America. So we have only 2 or 3 companies which give high flow nasal oxygen therapy currently in the market. So what are the physiological benefits? It leads to improved oxygenation. It decreases the anatomical dead space owing to washout of the upper airway. So I'll be discussing the above 2 points briefly in the next couple of slides. It leads to generation of positive nasopharyngeal and tracheal airway pressures, mainly because of resistance to the flow. It leads to improvement in work of breathing, and precondition of the inspired gas by heating and humidification will lead to better clearance of secretions, superior comfort, and also it decreases the metabolic cost of breathing, and also it reduces the carbon dioxide generation, first by decreasing the work of breathing, and also there are studies to say that it also decreases the respiratory rate. So how does a high flow nasal oxygen improve the oxygenation? So one, we are giving higher flow rates. thereby we can give higher FiO2s, and also because of the PEEP effect. So I would like to give a brief example of how higher delivery of higher flow rates and higher FiO2 will help in better oxygenation. So imagine a patient who has acute hypoxemic respiratory failure, who is very tachypneic, breathing at rate of 40 or 50 per minute. The peak inspiratory demands of this patient will be over and above the traditional normal breathing inspiratory demands. It will be somewhere in the range of 60 to 90 liters per minute. So none of the devices that we have, apart from the high flow nasal oxygen therapy devices, will be able to deliver such higher flows. Say we are giving oxygen at the rate of 15 liters per minute. The patient is breathing at the rate of 60, more than at the rate of 90 liters per minute. So there will be entrainment of large amounts of room air. So the end oxygen which is being delivered to the patient, which is reaching the alveoli, is probably somewhere near room air rather than the amount of oxygen that we are giving. However, if we give higher oxygen at higher flow rates, so if you're giving oxygen at the rate of 60 liters per minute, so it will meet the inspiratory demands of these patients, and thereby higher amount of FiO2 reaches the alveoli, thereby improving oxygenation. And also it also leads to PEEP, increase in PEEP. How does higher flows lead to increase in PEEP? So when we increase the flow, there will be resistance against the expiratory flow, which leads to increase in the airway pressure. So there are studies to say that this increase in flow and increase in PEEP is linearly related. So and it also depends on various other factors, like whether the patient has got a mouth open or whether they have got closed breathing. So roughly, if the patients are breathing with a closed mouth, every 10 liters increase in flow will lead to 1 centimeter increase in PEEP. So beyond 60 liter, beyond 60 liters of liter per minute of flow, you can achieve what is called as super flows and super PEEP. There is some evidence, there are some mechanistic studies where they have calculated the airway pressures that are generated at flows of 100 liters per minute. They roughly say that you can generate a PEEP of up to 10 liters per minute. However, we currently don't have any device which can deliver more than 60 liters per minute of flow. The other determinants of the PEEP are the set flow rate, the peak inspiratory flows, the tidal volume, the patient's physiology, whether the patient is obese, and depending upon the age of the patient, whether the patient is a child, whether the patient is an adult, and also whether the patient is breathing with a mouth closed or open. These are several factors which determine the amount of PEEP that the patient gets. So moving on next, I'd like to explain in this slide how carbon dioxide washout happens. So in this diagram, in the picture A, so we have a patient who is breathing in a venturi with a face mask, venturi face mask. So the blue determines the pathway of oxygen flow provided by the device. So the red determines the exhalation pathway of the gas. So both NIV, which is on the extreme right, and the venturi mask, which is on the extreme left, have significantly increases the dead space, because patient, when exhaling, all the gas gets accumulated in this port. So the only part which gets washed out is probably the tube where the flow is consistent. So patient will invariably rebreathe, especially patients who are acutely hypoxemic will have significant higher breathing rates. So they will invariably rebreathe some of their own exhaled gas, which probably has higher amount of CO2 and probably lesser than 21% of oxygen. However, in a patient who is breathing on HFNC, so because of the higher flow rates, their upper airway is completely washed out with the amount of gas that we are supplying through the HFNC. So this leads to carbon dioxide washout. This leads to decrease in dead space. That is beautifully depicted in this middle picture. So the entire upper part of the airway is completely washed out, and it is freshly replaced with all the fresh gas that we are providing. So thereby decreasing the rebreathing that happens, and probably decreasing the dead space. So let me explain how HFNC also decreases the work of breathing. So this is a comparison of how what changes happen in terms of airway pressure, esophageal pressures, and transpulmonary pressure. In spontaneous breathing, patients will generate, because of the activity of the inspiratory muscles, there will be, say, negative pleural pressure, which gets reflected in the your esophageal pressure. There is a large negative esophageal pressure, and there will be some change in the pleural pressure, okay, which is much more positive. So HFNC is the only device which decreases the esophageal pressure, which is the pleural pressure, and also it decreases the transpulmonary pressure, as against to any other devices. For example, even in NIV, although it decreases the negative pleural pressure or the esophageal pressure, but it increases the transpulmonary pressure significantly, leading to what you call as lung injury. So the ventilation induced lung injury can happen in patients with NIV as well. In patients with who are spontaneously breathing, also can this large increases in the transpulmonary pressure will lead to what we know now known as patient self-inflicted lung injury. So because of the stress and strain that happens at the level of alveoli, when patients are in acutely hypoxemic, they'll generate large changes in pleural pressure, which gets transmitted to the alveoli, thereby leading to lung injury. So this is a known entity. We call it as patient self-inflicted lung injury, or in short, PCLI. HFNC, by decreasing the negative pleural pressures or the swings, and also by decreasing the transpulmonary pressure, it decreases the incidence of PCLI. So even in NIV, the incidence of PCLI, the airway pressure getting transmitted because of the positive pressure that we apply, will lead to some amount of lung injury, which is decreased in patients with HFNC. Also, in patients with acute hypoxemic respiratory failure, there will be increased neural drive. If the patients are completely paralyzed or sedated, as in patients who are on controlled mechanical ventilation, there will be inappropriate efforts. So this will lead to excessive unloading of the patient's diaphragm, which decreases the diaphragmatic activity, leading to increase in oxidative stress. Decreases. It also leads to decrease in protein synthesis, protein degradation, and leads to atrophy of the diaphragm. So what we know as ventilator induced diaphragm dysfunction. On the other end, if these patients are not inadequately supported, this leads to increase in the neural drive, insufficient unloading, which leads to high diaphragm activity, leading to sarcomere disruption, and again diaphragm dysfunction. So at extremes of ends, when these patients are supported with sedation and paralysis and on mechanical ventilation, and when they are not inadequately supported, all of this will lead to diaphragm protection. HFNC, which is probably intermediate to both of these, probably will help in prevention of diaphragm injury as well. So most of the studies that we know of say that the HFNC also will not significantly lead to better outcomes. So the reason for that may be because we don't know when to stop HFNC and when to put these patients on mechanical ventilation, when to put that full stop, when to say enough is enough, let's move on to the next therapy. So we don't know when to shift from a HFNC device to invasive mechanical ventilation. So we have a new way of finding it. We call it as ROX index. So it is an index which combines the respiratory rate, patient's oxygenation, that is okay, and it predicts the outcome of nasal high flow therapy. So according to this study by Rocco et al., which was published in 2019, so a ROX index of less than 3.85, whenever a patient reaches a ROX index of less than 3.85, we can say with confidence that more than 50% of these patients will end up getting intubated, will end up getting mechanically ventilated at the end of 24 hours. So from the point of reaching ROX less than 3.85, from that point, within the span of next 24 hours, more than 50% of the patients will need mechanical ventilation. So this is a kind of index which we look at. If the patient's ROX index falls below 3.85, these are the patients who need to be intubated. However, if the patient's ROX index consistently remains more than 4.88, so we can safely say that these patients can be continued on high flow oxygen nasal therapy. Okay, so this is a predictor of failure. So whenever we need to keep monitoring, and in fact, in our current practice, we get alerts, automated alerts to say whenever patient's ROX status is falling. So whenever the ROX index goes below 3.85, we get an automated alert saying that you need to be watchful. We need to be watchful of these patients. So what is the evidence to support high flow nasal oxygen therapy? So we all have heard of this trial, the Florali trial, which is a French study done in 2015. I'll discuss briefly about it in the next few slides. We also have this HOT ER study, which was a study which was done mainly in emergency room. So both did show contradictory results. HOT ER study did not show significant benefit. However, Florali study did show some benefit, in patients who were on HFNC therapy. So in the Florali study, so it was a study which was done in French ICUs. It is a multi-center open label trial. 23 French ICUs were involved. They did the study over a period of 2 years. The inclusion criteria was adults who had respiratory failure with a PF ratio of less than 300 millimeters of mercury, while the patient was breathing more than 10 liters per minute for at least 15 minutes. And exclusion criteria was patients who had hypercapnic respiratory failure with PSO2 of more than 45 millimeters of mercury. So they enrolled about 310 patients. So the primary outcome of this study was proportion of patients who required endotracheal intubation within 28 days after randomization. So in high flow oxygen therapy group, about 40 patients required intubation, and in non-invasive ventilation group, about 55% needed endotracheal intubation, and in standard oxygen group, about 44 patients required intubation. So there was no significant difference. It did not achieve statistical significance. However, in patients who had severe respiratory failure, in patients who had a PF ratio of less than 200 millimeters of mercury, use of high flow nasal oxygen improved outcomes. So it decreased the incidence of intubation. So although this was not a primary outcome, they however conclude that there was a trend towards improvement, especially in patients who are much more sicker. There are several weaknesses in this study. 25% of the patients in the non-invasive group received this treatment for less than 4 hours each day. Although there were other flaws in the study, this could not be generalizable to all the patients of hypoxemic respiratory failure. Overall, there are a lot of other studies where in other settings, especially in post-operative settings, especially immediately after extubation, there are several positive studies that quote that use of HFNC will lead to decrease in intubations, and also using of HFNC, especially in patients who are on acute exacerbation of COPD, who got extubated, who went on to get HFNC therapy post extubation. So there will be decrease in the incidence of reintubation, and also in patients with who have immunodeficiencies. So especially in oncology patients who are on immunosuppressive therapy, or patients who are immunosuppressed because of HIV. So delaying intubation in these patients, HFNC has shown some benefit. So to conclude, the galaxy of HFNC effects is probably because of diaphragm protection, lung protection, and improved oxygenation. So mainly it achieves this by decreasing the patient's self-inflicted lung injury, lowering the saturation, and also by preventing the failure of the muscles. Mainly the diaphragm dysfunction. So these are my references. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to take. So before ending my talk, I would like to briefly explain how this device works. In most of the centers where we are currently working, we are taking care of, we are associated with Government of Karnataka, and we are working with 3 of their COVID care centers. We do see about 16, 12 to 16 HFNC devices routinely every day. So one most common mistake that every clinician does is thinking that the amount of FiO2 the oxygen that we set is the flow that the patient is getting. So I'd like to briefly explain how this device works. Okay, so this is an oxygen flow meter, so which is connected with the pipeline, which is connected to the pipeline. Okay, so this is a FiO2 indicator. We can adjust the FiO2 here. This is a blender, we can adjust the FiO2 here. So this is the humidifier, this is the heated humidifier, and this goes to the patient. Okay, so what you can set traditionally is, you can set, the first thing that you will set is the total flows. So for most of these acutely hypoxemic patients, I would start with a flow of 60 liters per minute, probably at 100% oxygen. So all of what I'm giving will be 60 liters will be pure oxygen. So once these patients get better, the first thing that I'll come down is the FiO2. So I'll start decreasing the FiO2. So once you start decreasing the amount of oxygen that you are giving, the FiO2 delivered will change. However, if you don't change the set flow, the flow will remain the same. Okay, so once the patients start improving, and probably if they are oxygenating better at FiO2s less than 40%, then I'll start reducing the flows. So till we achieve that, we should not reduce flows. We should give the benefit of higher flows, thereby having some PEEP effect. So this is similar to what we do in mechanical ventilation as well, where we first reduce the FiO2s and then we'll come down on PEEP. So it is similar to that. That is one thing which most clinicians do mistake. So what they think is, they forget that we have to change the flows at the at the machine. What they do is they just change the flows, and they think that the patient's flow will change based on the flow that we adjust at the blender. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take.
Thank you, Dr. Sandesh, for a very nice presentation, and I hope you have cleared a lot of concepts about HFNC. And we have a question from Dr. Hetal Vadera. How do you get automated alert of ROX index? Any app or inbuilt alarm in machine itself?
Okay, so I need to briefly tell what we do and what we are for that, to answer that question. So Cloud Physician is a healthcare startup. We have our own proprietary EMR, that is electronic medical records, where we have detail of all our patients. So all our patients are continuously monitored by a team of nurses, critical care nurses, and intensivists round the clock. So all our patients who we monitor, we have a data of them. So we have the amount of oxygen that these patients are getting. So we have the data of the saturation that these patients have, and we also clinically monitor them by looking at them through our high definition cameras. So we know what is the respiratory rate with which they are breathing. So once all of this data goes into the system automatically calculates, because our engineers have designed these alerts. So we get an automatic alert whenever the calculated rate goes beyond that. So we have not yet we don't have a lower limit of 4. So what we started to get we start to get alerts at the you know 6 itself. So once the ROX index goes below 6, we'll start getting alerts saying that this patient is going bad, you need to go and see this patient. So because of the inbuilt EMR that we have, we get alerts.
Okay. So it is not a feature of HFNC machine, but that of Cloud Physician, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Dr. Prema Rajgopalan is asking what is the cost of HFNC apparatus?
So I think the ones with from Fisher and Paykel is available for somewhere around 2 lakhs. And but if we have these Chinese ones that we have, like the Vincent Medical, so probably they are providing it at a cost of 1 lakh rupees.
Okay. Dr. Aparna Sinha ma'am is asking, will request elaboration of the index to decide ventilator.
So okay, so let me go back to the slide of ROX index. Okay. So this ROX index came into picture based on this one particular study by Roca et al. So what they found out was when the ROX index falls below 3.85. So as you can see here, ROX index going down means patient's respiratory rate is going up. The denominator is going up and hence the ROX index is falling. So that means the patient is breathing harder now. So when this ratio becomes 3.85, so after 24 hours, they found out in this study that more than 50% of the people ended up on mechanical ventilation. Okay, so you don't want to wait till they end up in respiratory failure. Okay, so they know based on this study for sure that more than 50% of the patients will end up in respiratory failure if you don't intervene at that point in time. Suppose, so this 3.85 can be 4. So if you are monitoring this, if the ROX index touches 4, you need to consider intubating this patient. If this patient is for full escalation of therapy, you need to intervene there and put these patients on additional therapy. It could be NIV if you're considering NIV as an next step in your workflow, or it could be mechanical ventilation by endotracheal intubation. But you need to do something at that level. If you don't do, more than 50% of the patients in the next 24 hours will end up in respiratory failure. So there is no point intubating these patients at the point of respiratory failure, because we know that once you start, if you delay therapy further, the outcomes are probably poor.
Okay.
I hope I am clear.
Yeah, sure. Dr. Neelam Nalge is asking, will the PEEP increase only if they are breathing by mouth, or it will significantly increase in oral breathing?
Well, there are studies to say that when the patients breathe with an open mouth, because this is an airway pressure, because if it's an open system, the amount of PEEP that the patient gets will decrease. They will definitely get some amount of PEEP, but it won't be as effective as when the patients breathe with a closed mouth. If they are breathing through oral cavity, once you are on HFNC, the amount of PEEP that the patient gets will be less. So as I've showed in this study, you can see the difference. So there will be a difference of 1 centimeter, 1 to probably 1.5 centimeters difference will be there.
Okay. Dr. Satkar Pawar is asking how frequently we have to use it. Is it used continuously, or we use it for particular duration, give some gap, and then again reuse it?
So it should be for continuous use.
Okay.
Because the advantage of using this is, unlike non-invasive ventilation, patients can eat, drink, and do about their activities even when the HFNC is on. So actually, if you compare, if you routinely use it, you will see that HFNC is better tolerated compared to your simple face mask, and even compared to your NIV machine, because both of these devices will have the feeling of claustrophobia. So that feeling won't be there in HFNC device.
Okay. Another question is from Dr. Dilnaz ma'am. Where do you set the PEEP in this machine?
Okay, so the PEEP is not set. So as I have explained in my talk, so the PEEP set is dependent on the flow that you're setting. Suppose you set a flow of 60 liters per minute. If the patient's breathing, with a closed mouth, we can roughly say that the patient will get a PEEP of somewhere around 5 centimeters.
Okay. Great.
So the flow is the factor which determines the PEEP. So if you want a PEEP effect for your patients, you set a higher PEEP, higher flow rates.
Okay. One more question from Dr. Sushma Sampath ma'am. She is asking, what about oxygen consumption with such high flows?
If the query is regarding what kind of oxygen setup you should have, so it needs a similar kind of setup that you have for your mechanical ventilation. So it should be somewhere around 60 liters per minute. So we need to get probably a system where we have sufficient oxygen supply. So it will be, if you put the patient on continuous 60 liters per minute, so the oxygen consumption will be 60 liters per minute all throughout.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Sandesh.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me here.
I hope people will see this presentation later on as well, and they might have certain questions. If they will be asking this question on the group task on this post, and we can answer them there.
Yeah, I'll be happy to take questions even after this talk, and I'll be able to help as much as possible. I'll be able to hope clear most of your doubts.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Sandesh.
Thank you, doctor. Thanks for your time.
Bye bye.